Good afternoon and welcome to the stated meeting of October 17th, 2019. I am Majority Leader Lori Cumbo. We have perhaps the most important vote that the Council will take today. We have had many months of hearings, deliberations, rallies, town hall, press conferences to get to this point today. We thank all of you for being here, for taking time out of your schedule to be here for this very historical vote. Given the volatile climate that we are in this nation at this time, for safety reasons, we are asking that this entire meeting be respected and that we hear from each and every member. There are many opposing viewpoints, and each member of the City Council has a different viewpoint that we need to hear today. And we would like for all of you to be able to hear the positions and the debates that are going to happen on the floor today, because it is critical for each of you to be able to go back to your prospective communities to report what happened today. But again, as I stated, for safety reasons, particularly given the way the balcony is constructed, we have to make sure that we respect one another, that we hear one another, and that deliberations take place in a respectful manner. We don't all have to agree, but we all have to respect each other's important viewpoints that are going to be expressed today. Unfortunately, the first outburst, the first disruption, is going to cause the entire balcony and this chamber to be cleared, which will unfortunately not allow everyone to hear the deliberations that are very critical to the future of New York City. We ask for your respect. We ask for the ability to have mutual understandings of respect with one another. So I thank you again for being here today. As I stated at the last stated meeting, my predecessor, the late James E. Davis, was shot and killed right here in this particular room. And so because of that, we are asking that we move in a respectful manner, because for each of the members here today, they all want to go back home to their families. So we want to make sure that we have a safe, productive, and respectful meeting. We will now have communication from Speaker Corey Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. Good afternoon, and I want to thank you all for being here today for this very important stated meeting. I want to begin by acknowledging that this morning our country faced a great loss. Congressmember Elijah Cummings, who has been a giant in the fight for civil rights and justice, died. His leadership has been a blessing his entire time in public service, and he will be missed. As we do every stated meeting, I want to recognize some of the important events that have happened recently. Sadly, we have lost 2 NYPD officers since our last stated meeting. Officer Brian Mulkeen died in the line of duty on September 29th. We will be forever grateful for his service. He was 33 years old. Unfortunately, another member of the department has died by suicide. NYPD Sergeant Lin Hong Lee died at his home in Queens. He was also 33 years old. Sergeant Lee's death marks the 10th suicide by a member of the NYPD so far this year. My condolences are with their families and the men and women of the department. If we could please rise for a moment of silence. Thank you. This month is also Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It is an important time to remind those who are suffering from domestic abuse that they are not alone. The city provides support, which can be found at www.nyc.gov/NYC Hope. I also want to acknowledge that this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, when people are urged to get screened for breast cancer. And as you can see by many of the members of the council here today, we are wearing a rainbow ribbon in honor of National Coming Out Day and also Spirit Day, which was last week. Everyone deserves to be accepted for who they are and who they love. This week, we also celebrate the Jewish holiday of Sukkot. If you have not seen it already, there is a sukkah outside of City Hall on Broadway. This is City Hall's first sukkah, and I want to thank Councilmember Chaim Deutsch and the Jewish Caucus for their leadership. I urge everyone to stop in and take a break from the hustle and bustle of our city. Now, if we are going to dive into our legislative agenda for today, it is certainly an important one. I'll start with some land use items. We'll be voting on 5 historic districts, 4 located in Sunset Park in Councilmember Carlos Menchaca's district, and the 5th is Doctors Row, located in Councilmember Justin Brannon's district. In addition to these historic districts, we'll vote on 76-780 Myrtle Avenue, which will facilitate the development of 59 units of supportive and affordable housing in Councilmember Robert Cornge's district, and we'll be voting on 2 applications in Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer's district, Vernon Boulevard rezoning, which will facilitate 3 mixed-use buildings, and the 38th Street rezoning, which will facilitate a 7-story building. Both applications will be modified to include MIH option 1 only. And in Councilmember Francisco Moya's district, we're going to vote on the Lefrak City parking garage to ensure the continued use of the garage. The Beach Channel Drive, Clintonville Street rezoning, and 71st Road rezoning would legalize existing uses in Councilmember Eric Ulrich, Paul Vallone, and Karen Kozlowitz's respective districts. And Terrence Cardinal Cook applications would facilitate the rehabilitation of Flower Hill Nursing Facility, the development of a 32-story residential building, a PACE center for the elderly, and a supportive housing building in Councilmember Diana Ayala's district. There are also 2 land use items relating to the Urban Development Action Area Project, UDAP, Blake Hendricks and Councilmember Inez Barron's district, and NME 3 West 140th and West 150th Street in Councilmember Bill Perkins' district. We'll also vote on the following Article 11 property tax exemptions out of the Finance Committee. Crown Plaza Apartments in Majority Leader Lori Cumbo's district will receive a partial 40-year exemption to preserve 76 units of affordable rental housing, and 2178 Atlantic Avenue in Councilmember Alika Ampry Samuel's district will receive a partial 40-year exemption to preserve 16 units of affordable rental housing. Moving on, the council will vote on the following pieces of legislation. First, the council is voting on a bill to prohibit vending on certain streets in Dyker Heights, Brooklyn during the holiday season. Introduction 1657A, sponsored by Councilmember Justin Brannon, would prohibit street vending on certain streets in Dyker Heights during the popular Dyker Light celebration. The ban would be in effect from 2 p.m. to 6 a.m. each day from Thanksgiving until New Year's Day, and will help alleviate congestion in this residential neighborhood over the holiday season. And I want to thank the staff, Balkis Mirig, for her help on that bill. Next, we're going to be voting on a comprehensive and sound package of legislation to not only close Rikers Island, but on key measures that expands the rights for those currently incarcerated and to ensure communities impacted by the closure have important resources. The first of our bills is sponsored by Councilmember Diana Ayala. Pre-considered introduction number 1742A would require increased reporting on the implementation of the borough-based jail plan. It would require the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice to issue a progress report on closing jails on Rikers Island and any related efforts to both reduce the jail population in the city and open jail facilities outside of Rikers Island. MOCJ would also be required to report on jail population trends, the timeline for the closure of Rikers Island, budget and procurement of contracts related to the closure, design and construction of jail facilities, and changes to inform technology infrastructure and staffing plans. The bill would also require an additional report from the Board of Correction on the impact of the construction of city jails on compliance with Board of Correction minimum standards and the impact of any significant changes to the design or construction of any new facilities on incarcerated individuals. The Board of Correction would also be required to issue a report on conditions and facilities prior to the Department of Correction housing incarcerated individuals on conditions at such facilities. The board would also be required to give access to blueprints, program plans, and other materials related to the design and construction of the facilities, and I want to thank Brian Crow and Alana Sivan from the staff for working on this bill. Next is pre-considered introduction number 1762, sponsored by Councilmember Keith Powers, which would require correctional facilities to be modernized and built in a way that is more livable for people in custody. The bill also allows incarcerated individuals to decorate a designated area of their living quarters and requires the Department of Correction staff to address people in custody by their names and preferred pronouns where practicable. And I want to thank Brian and Ilana for working on that as well. Next is Introduction 1590, sponsored by Councilmember Margaret Chin, which would require Correctional Health Services, which operates all mental health care for those in custody, to communicate with defense attorneys about the status and progress of individuals with serious mental illness. It would also help their attorneys identify the right treatment and housing alternatives to jail and prison so that we can rehabilitate people rather than incarcerate them. And I want to thank the staff, Daniel Adis, for his work on that bill. We're also have some legislation sponsored by Councilmember Steve Levin. Pre-considered introduction number 1759A would establish a commission on community reinvestment to be chaired by the Department of Social Services. The commission would be required to issue a yearly set of recommendations on investments that address the root causes of mass incarceration. The first report would be due in January of 2021, and the last report would be issued in 2027. And I want to thank the staff who worked on this, Brian Crow, Alana Sivin, and Keeshorn Denny. Next is Introduction 153B, and it would codify the three-quarter houses task force. Three-quarter houses are typically 1- and 2-family homes, larger apartment buildings, or other structures run by operators who rent beds to single adults. Many tenants are formerly incarcerated, and typically their only option would be living in a shelter or being homeless. This multi-agency task force in this bill would be charged with identifying and inspecting these homes, and when necessary, helping people relocate to other more appropriate housing options. And I want to thank the staff, Aminta Kilawan, for her work on that bill. And finally, 2 land use items that will change our city in monumental ways. We'll be voting on citing 4 borough-based jails in Councilmember Diana Ayala, Margaret Chin, Karen Kozlowitz, and Steve Levin's districts to facilitate the closure of the detention centers on Rikers Island, as well as the existing detention centers in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Bronx to build new, more humane facilities. In addition, there is a pre-considered resolution on the filing of a land use application regarding Rikers Island, which authorizes the City Council to file a land use application amending the city map to establish a public place with a use restriction on Rikers Island. The restriction is that Rikers Island shall not be used for the incarceration of individuals after December 31st, 2026, and this will guarantee the closure of Rikers. I don't think I am overstating it when I say that for many of us, this is one of the most significant votes of our entire career. In addition to closing Rikers, this plan will also lead to the closure of the current Manhattan Detention Complex, the Brooklyn House of Detention, and the Vernon C. Bain Correctional Center, which is also known as the Barge or the Boat. These facilities aren't as famous as Rikers Island, but they are equally horrific and inhumane. Rikers Island is a symbol of brutality and inhumanity, and it is time for us to once and for all close Rikers Island. What we are doing today will reshape this city for generations to come and will impact the lives of every New Yorker. For decades, our city was unfair to those who became involved in our justice system, and the overwhelming majority of New Yorkers who got caught up in our justice system were black and brown men. In too many cases, they were struggling with untreated mental illness or addiction or poverty or some combination of the 3 of those things. And our city did not step up and offer them the appropriate resources and solutions. Only incarceration. We let those New Yorkers down.
Quiet
we cannot
in the chamber.
undo all of the mistakes of the past. But as a city, we must do everything we can to move away from the failed policies of mass incarceration. That is what we are doing today. We are on the cusp of a new, more humane era for our city, and it took a lot of work to help us get here. I want to commend and give tremendous accolades to my predecessor, Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, for her vision and leadership and helping to bring us to this point. Where is she? Melissa, thank you. Thank you for your leadership, for everything you've done on this. And before I go any further, I want to thank 4 members whose leadership brought us to this point. Councilmember Diana Ayala, Councilmember Margaret Chin, Councilmember Karen Kozlowitz, and Councilmember Steve Levin. Balancing the needs. Balancing the needs of your districts and the needs of our city was not an easy task, but you all did an extraordinary job. Your commitment to doing the right thing was inspiring and the epitome of public service. We have spent weeks and months and well over a year working together. You have fought hard. You have been thoughtful, compassionate, empathetic, and brought your own world life experiences to this point. I am proud of every single one of you for your tremendous courage, bravery, and leadership in the face of opposition. You all inspire me. We would not be here today without every single one of you. So I want to say thank you, Karen. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Margaret. And thank you, Diana, for everything you've done to get us to this point. You all have been heroes in this process, and I am proud of each one of you. What we are voting on today is a plan that is responsive to the concerns of communities where the facilities will be located. The plan is also responsive to the concerns of the communities and families that have been harmed, way too harmed, by the long-term impact of mass incarceration. It makes significant citywide investments in housing, mental health care, restorative justice, alternatives to incarceration, alternatives to detention, and violence prevention programs. We are not only closing inhumane, dilapidated jails, but we're investing $391 million in communities to help reform our system and address the root causes of mass incarceration. Nearly 70% of that, $265 million of that $391 million number, $265 million is new spending that is attached to this plan we are voting on today. And that is on top of $40 million that this city council secured in the June adopted budget to help people who are justice involved. We are proud of these victories. These investments are the heart of this plan that we're talking about, because if you look at the Close Rikers t-shirts of the brave leaders that are in this room today, if you look at their t-shirts, it says Close Rikers, build communities. Close Rikers and build communities. This is not and has never, ever been just about building new jails. Of course, we know that it is important to get the facilities right. I have been to Rikers. I was on Rikers last week with Councilmember with Councilmember Ayala and Councilmember Levin and Councilmember Drum. We walked around Rikers Island. Rikers Island is a stain on New York City. Rikers Island should have been closed decades ago. And many of the people on Rikers Island never should be there to begin with. I have talked to formerly incarcerated New Yorkers. Many of them are here today. sitting in the balcony. They have led this effort. They have led the coalition. They were part of the Lippman Commission. They have met with council members. They have told us their real-life experiences. They've talked about the harm that has been caused to them and their families because of mass incarceration. They are the ones that joined with Speaker Mark Viverito to formulate the Lippman Commission plan and to work with us every step of the way. I am so proud of these activists and leaders that brought us to this point. We would not be here without each and every one of them. The current jail facilities, the Brooklyn House of Detention, the Barge, the Tombs, these are not facilities that can be fixed. These facilities are irredeemable. These facilities are dilapidated. It would be inhumane to close Rikers Island down and house people in those existing facilities. The Brooklyn House of Detention does not have air conditioning. It is like an oven in the summer. It is unacceptable. It matters if you have air conditioning in the summer and if you have heat in the winter. It matters if you have sunlight in a bathroom. It matters if you have services and programming to help you when you are incarcerated. This matters to not just those who are incarcerated, but it matters to all of us in New York City, that people are getting the care and help and rehabilitation that they need. People were and are tortured on Rikers Island. We visited solitary confinement last week. It was like a bad horror movie. It is sick and unacceptable. They come home to our communities damaged and angry and sicker than before they went in to a correctional facility. It is in our interest to have facilities with programming that prioritizes rehabilitation, that prioritizes restorative justice, that prioritizes mental health care, that prioritizes workforce training, that prioritizes these issues. And the current facilities do not allow this. The facilities are one part of this plan. The other part of the plan are the investments that I mentioned. You cannot have one without the other. You must close Rikers and build and invest in communities. We are investing in stopping violence before it happens. We are investing in housing because it is difficult to stay sober or keep a job or stay on your medication if you don't have a roof over your head. We are investing in getting the right mental health treatment for people who should never be on Rikers Island to begin with. I am proud of this plan, and I am grateful for the hard work that went into it by the City Council staff and by the tireless advocates who have held our feet to the fire to make sure that we get this right. I want to thank the following organizations: the Cattell Center for Health, Equity, and Justice, Just Leadership USA, the Fortune Society, Exodus Transitional Communities, the Vera Institute for Justice, the Women's Community Justice Foundation, the Columbia University Justice Lab, as well as an amazing man who has worked hard, tirelessly, with Speaker Mark Viverito and with me over the last many years. I want to thank former Chief Judge Jonathan Lippman and everyone who worked on the Independent Commission for the New York City Criminal Justice and Incarceration Reform Plan. And I want to thank my staff who worked tremendously hard on this. My Chief of Staff, Jason Goldman, who hasn't gotten much sleep these last many weeks. He has a small baby, and he's been doing this every single day and night. I want to thank Laura Popa, Peter Butler, Brian Crow, and Alana Sivan, Raju Mann, the Director of Land Use, who has been incredible in his team, Lillian Pascone, who has led this charge from day one, has been working for this on a weekly basis for over a year in a calm, cool, collected, organized, thoughtful, and measured way, George Sarkisian, Regina Pareto-Ryan, LaTanya McKinney, and Isha Wright. I'd also like to, again, I'd like to thank my predecessor, Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, for starting this conversation and for getting us to this point today. And I want to thank Mayor de Blasio and his entire staff, including his Chief of Staff, Emma Wolf, for partnering with the City Council to finally close Rikers Island. I see Liz Glazer and her team are here today. I want to thank you, Liz, and your team for your partnership and help in securing these investments to invest in communities, to build communities. You all have been part of that. I am proudly voting yes to close Rikers Island. This is the right thing to do. We have an opportunity to reform our justice system. We have an opportunity to invest in communities. We have the opportunity to help people. This will be a vote for a new criminal justice system, a vote against mass incarceration, which has robbed this city and this country of generations of men who left our system traumatized and broken. And this is a vote that recognizes the dignity of people and communities that have had their humanity overlooked for decades. This is a vote of conscience. This is a vote of progress. This vote does not serve to solve all of the problems that we face here in New York City. We still have a homelessness epidemic. We still have too many people not getting the mental health care that we need. We still need to break the school to prison pipeline. There is still more work to do, but conditions matter. These jails are disgusting. These jails should have been closed years ago. We are doing it today. I will proudly vote yes. Thank you all very, very much.
We will now move into general discussion.
Madam Majority Leader, I'm going to just call, if it's okay, on the four of the members. You have it? Okay.
We'll now have Councilmember Karen Koslowitz.
Nearly 4.5 years ago, the proposal to finally close Rikers Island and open a borough-based jail in my district came to my attention, and thanks to former Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, who started this with the Littman Commission. While understanding the importance of closing the inhuman hellhole that is Rikers Island, I was troubled by aspects of the mayor's original proposal. However, understanding the high likelihood that this proposal would be approved, I made it my priority to sit down at the negotiating table and do the hard work of governing. It was my goal to make a better deal for my community, those that fall through the cracks of our criminal justice system, and those that work at our jail facilities. Through many, many, many conversations that I have had with the mayor and his administration, I am proud to have secured many concessions that will make the facility better blend into our community. I also believe that the final proposal will better serve those that are incarcerated and those that have loved ones that are incarcerated. We significantly reduced the size and the height of the building. The facility will now stand 195 feet tall or 19 stories high, a big drop from original 29 stories. We got rid of the proposed centralized infirmary, which was taking all people from all boroughs, have the square footage of the building, significantly reduced the density of the building, nearly cut the number of beds in half to 886, created hundreds of necessary parking spaces. We're investing millions of dollars into our schools. Significant investments are going into the neighborhood's infrastructure. We've secured important resources for our seniors. We're providing essential necessities to the less fortunate, and we've secured 25,000 square feet for community use. Now, some of my colleagues and members of the public do not support this plan. To them I ask, have you ever been to Rikers Island? Have you ever... Have you ever been to the Queen's House of Detention? Because I have visited both locations, and I can tell you that both are absolutely inhumane and are an embarrassment to our great city. New Yorkers, no matter their transgressions, do not deserve to rot in these tiny, dilapidated cages at Rikers or the Queen's House of Detention, especially up to 80% of the detainees at Rikers have yet to be convicted of a crime. If we, as body, want to do the progressive, moral, and just thing, we will vote yes on this proposal, because voting no with no substantial alternative will absolutely mean that Rikers Island will stay open for generations to come. There is nothing moral, just, or progressive about that. Let me also speak to my constituents, particularly those in Kew Gardens who I have heard from a lot the last several months. While I know that some of you do not understand my position on this proposal, I am confident that the future will calm your concerns. Remember that for 40 years, the Queen's House of Detention housed 500 inmates in Kew Gardens. I've been in the community for 56 years, and I can tell you that facility did not jeopardize the safety of the neighborhood. It did not negatively impact property values, and it did not change the character of the neighborhood. It's my highest priority that as we move forward on this proposal, that there remain an open dialogue between the mayor and me to ensure that any negative impact in regards to the construction of the facility and the facility itself be minimized. I've been in the city council for over 20 years, both in the 90s and now, and this is the most difficult proposal that I have ever come across my desk. There is a lot of nuance, a lot of passion, and a lot of emotion. I can tell you that nothing of this magnitude comes to fruition without a lot of hard work from a lot of individuals. I would like to thank at this time Judge Lippman, who had come forward with the Lippman Commission, and of course, Council Speaker past Melissa Mark Favorito. I would also like to thank our people who have been there with every question that I have had. George Sarkeesian, Raju Mann, John Douglas, and Amy Levitine. You've also been wonderful, magnanimous on this whole thing. I also want to thank Brian Crow, Lillian Pascone, and a special thanks to Jason Goldman for being there every time I would call and ask a question. And of course, to my three other colleagues that we've worked together and we stood together, I want to say thank you to Diana, to Margaret, and to Steve. Thank you. And I also want to thank people from the mayor's office, Lyden Sleeper, who I didn't let breathe for a few days in the past couple of weeks, and Tahara Moore and Joseph Thompson. And a special and appreciative to our speaker, our great speaker. I knew from day one that you would lead this body in a wonderful way, and I just want to thank you for being there for me, calming me down when I got nervous, and just being there. Thank you so very much. And lastly, I will end by emphasizing that I would not support this proposal if I believe that it would have a negative impact on the community that I love. I've represented this community for 2 decades and have lived in it for more than a half of a century, and I could never, in good conscience, harm my neighbors. I passionately believe that this is a historic opportunity to rethink how we treat those that the city incarcerates. I urge my colleagues to vote yes.
Thank you, Councilmember Kozowitz. In the interest of time, because we did start the stated meeting late, we are going to allow the members who have borough-based jails in their district to speak unlimited, but for the remainder of the members, we're going to have to start the clock because we have not even done the vote. So at this time, we're going to go to Councilmember Margaret Chin, and then followed by Councilmember Steve Levin. We're going to begin now at this time. No, you are going to speak. Excuse me, Councilmember Diaz. Everyone that has signed up to speak will speak, but we are going to have to utilize the clock in order to be respectful of everyone's time. You will have an opportunity to speak. Councilmember Diaz, this conversation is closed. Councilmember Reverend Diaz.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. It was so impressive to listen to the speaker, so passionate, so intense, defending the project. The speaker used the word as inhumanity. Speaker used words as discrimination and savagery. It was very powerful. 45 minutes describing all the wrong things that the city is doing to the inmate. What the speaker failed to say, I'm going to say. Because he said the human part of what we all feel, that we have to do good for the neighbor, for whoever, for everyone. And in saying that, they want to create 4 new jails, one in the Bronx, one in Queens, one in Manhattan, and one in Brooklyn, none in Staten Island. Nobody asked why. Why? According to information that I have, the majority of inmates, or a great portion of inmates in Rikers Island come from Staten Island. And not only that this body that's supposed to be the progressive body of the world, they took this occasion 4 Europes and they made it into one. Each county is supposed to have, and then the Board of Delegation decide whatever, and then bring it. But no, each 4 Europes into one. Eat it. That's what they say. And they didn't respect the position of Planning Board number 1 in Bronx County, that unanimously, a planning board from members of the community unanimously voted against. They didn't care about that. They didn't care about that the board of president of the county is against it. They don't care about that. They didn't even care about that the community around Beckman House, all of that and there, they don't want it. They don't care. We know better than you, and we will do this with 4 Europes in one, and we're gonna stick a jail in your neighborhood, none in Staten Island. All because the speaker said the inhumane situation of the inmate. Well, let me tell you something, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, and the previous leadership of this county, of this group, previous leadership, I never saw that passion, that intense in protecting the tenant of nature. That's inhumane. You want to talk of inhumanity? That's inhumane. You never took that passion, having the children in nature dying from poison, from lead poisoning. That's inhumane. You never took that passion defending the people in nature that they don't have because they don't have money. Oh, we have 60,000 families living in shelter. Worse, doing worse than inmate doing. There's no passion for that. The passion is because the inmate, we got to protect, okay? But no passion. We got 60,000 families living like animals, in shelter, like animals. But no one cares about that. We're going to come here to talk about how disastrous is the condition of people in Rikers Island. What is going to happen to the land of Rikers Island after that happens? So, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. We all know because we got to take care of the inmates. They have to have air conditioning. They have to have technology. They have to have the best. Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen, you should come to the Bronx to our community schools in the summer. And go to those schools to you see how our children are put. They have no air conditioning. They have no air conditioning. So, who put the passion in finding money to put air conditioning to our children? No, nobody cares. Okay, nobody cares. But for the inmate in Rikers Island, we got to have their air conditioning. They deserve better. It's inhumane. Tell that to the 60,000 families in shelter. Tell that to the people in Nacha. Tell that to the children in our public school during the summer. Go ahead. That's inhumane. That's discrimination. That's abusive. To spend close to $10 billion to create 4 new jails so they could have air conditioning. You want a better life? We all want better life for our prisoners, for everybody. Take $2 billion out of that. Take Rikers Island, rebuild Rikers Island, make a ball field park. They could play baseball, they could have football, they could have the best life. If what you want is to get them a hotel, what's the best place to build them a hotel in Rikers Island? Go ahead, use $2 billion. Build them, rebuild Rikers Island,
Reverend
make it better.
Diaz, if you could begin to wind your comments down.
What was that? No, that's not the rule.
Reverend Diaz, the rule is that you have 2 minutes to speak. Anything above that is permission granted by me.
No, that's not the rule, madam. The rule is 10 minutes.
Would you like for me to read you the rule?
Wait, okay, madam, I don't want to argue with you. Would I?
So I'm asking you to wind down your comments so that everyone will have an opportunity to speak today. You have spoken longer than all of the other members. We're asking you to wind down your comments.
I understand, madam. I understand. See? I understand that, but see, the other guy was Levin. He was announcing birthday and everything.
He was granted permission because one of the borough-based jails is in his district.
Can I have the same
I
courtesy?
asked you politely to begin to wind down your comments. Simple as that.
And I asked you, can I have the same courtesy as the rest?
I'm asking you to wind down your comments.
So I don't have the same courtesy.
Excuse me?
I don't have the same courtesy as the rest.
Councilmember Diaz, everyone has had an opportunity to speak. If you could be respectful of your other colleagues, there are 8 other members who would like to
I've
speak.
been disrespectful. See that? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Grodenchik.
Thank you, Majority Leader Cumbo. It's been a long path for us to get to this point, but some things are certainly clear. Rikers Island is old. We haven't built a jail there in 30 years, and none of the people that built that jail is still around in the Corrections Department today. It has to be closed, and anybody who doubts that should read Preet Bharara's report on what happened to adolescent males who were incarcerated on Rikers Island. I doubt that you will get past the summary. That is how shocking it is. I don't want to be a party to that, and my conscience doesn't allow me to be. This process, as I said, has been challenging. Information has been difficult to come by. As recently as the preliminary budget hearings, we couldn't get hard facts, and anybody who knows me knows that I am very careful how we spend the taxpayers' money. And $8.75 billion is a lot of money, even in New York City. And some people rightfully argue that we could be doing other things with this money. But I believe that this city is big enough and has a big enough heart and enough money to do all those things that we need to do, and we will do them here in New York City. I think that the move to borough-based jails is common sense approach to government. My colleague Diana Yala a few minutes ago, maybe a few hours ago, suggested that no plan is perfect, and she's absolutely right. It's not a perfect plan. This plan is going to change some, and I understand that. I've been in government long enough to know that plans change, hopefully for the better, not always, but hopefully for the better. But I think it's a good start, and I think it's something that we can build on. I believe in second chances. Every day I wake up, I figure it's a new chance. I've been granted a new chance. I believe in third chances and fourth chances and 10th and 15th and 20th chances, because we're all human and we all make mistakes, and people need those chances. I want to talk about something that I rarely talk about, and that's my oldest brother. 60 years ago, almost, when there were no drug rehabilitation facilities, my oldest brother was a heroin addict. Most heroin addicts at that time, almost all of them, in fact, went to jail, because that's what you did with heroin addicts in the late 50s and early 60s. You sent them to jail. My brother got a progressive judge, maybe a common sense judge, maybe even a conservative judge, I don't know. But he offered him a chance at a place called Daytop Village, which was located in Councilman Borelli's district in Butler Manor. And my parents and I and my other siblings spent a lot of weekends taking the ferry to Staten Island. There was no Verrazano Bridge in those days, and visiting my brother. And it took him a couple of years. He got out of Daytop, and he spent a good chunk of his life helping other people to escape the throes of drug addiction. He is living today in Florida, and he is the sweetest guy in the world, except for Donovan Richards. But I don't know that he would have survived jail. And I know that what we're doing today is a much more humane approach to criminal justice in this city of New York. The Wall Street Journal today said that we led the way on great reductions in crime in this city, and that's taken place over the last quarter century. So I like to think that our great city that has led the way on so many different things will lead the way in a new era of penology and helping people and giving them second chances and third chances and fourth chances, and as many chances as we as a society can afford to give them. So in honor of my brother, I proudly vote aye on all today, and I thank you for indulging me, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing your truth. I'd now like to call on Councilmember Rodriguez, followed by Councilmember Rodriguez, followed by Councilmember Van Bramer, and then followed by Councilmember Espinal.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, former Speaker Viverito, Mayor de Blasio, and all the colleagues. When I was elected in 2009, I introduced a language for the legislation to close Rikers Island. I was told that the city didn't have jurisdiction to close Rikers Island. It happened in the previous administration. But when we, the progressive, took over the city council, and we had a mayor that not necessarily we agree on everything, but we understood that it was time for us to move forward. We started having real discussion, real conversation. Where we have a president and his follower promoting violence, and most of the funding going to the military instead of social services. When we look at the 13th Amendment documentary that show that incarceration is an extension of a slavery, let's call it what it is. We have to stop it. This is still the result of a society that lived in the past in real segregation, and that is still today, as we are trying to move forward and have real discussion. If you are Black, Latinos, immigrants, poor, you have a higher percentage to be stopped by the police and to be sent to a detention center. So today, we are not expecting that with the plan that we will be voting today, we will close this chapter. This is only a beginning of an effort where we are committed to not only celebrate Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, Cesar Chavez. We are committed to leave our fingerprints, to leave a nation where we should change our number. We have more people in jail than any country in the whole world. That's our number. And that affects all cities, and we are not excluded. We visited Rikers Island together with Danny Drum and others. When Elizabeth Crowley, she also was moving some ideas for criminal justice reform. The day came today, and I called my colleague, don't take it personal. This is about being immigrants, being poor, being Black, being Latino, living in a community that is segregated as we talk today. The only thing that I call the speaker is that we use your leadership and work with the mayor to build a second phase of these investments. We also should add an additional $10 billion to build CBOs in our local community, to provide those CBOs who are serving those poor neighborhood and immigrants their own buildings so that they don't have to struggle to provide the services. Because if you are poor children and immigrant children, you don't have the same program of art and music and gymnastics and education that a middle class and an upper middle class children get in our city. Hoy nosotros estamos haciendo historia. Es una historia de hacer una reforma a un sistema criminal que es racista, que no es cierto que la justicia es ciega. Si usted es inmigrante, si usted es pobre, si usted es negro, si usted es latino, usted tiene más probabilidad de ser parado por un policía y ser mandado a Rikers Island. Vivimos en una nación donde tiene más presos que el mundo entero. Tenemos un presidente que promueve la violencia, él y los que lo siguen. Y si continuamos viviendo en una sociedad que el Departamento de Estado pone más dinero para lo militar que el servicio social, vamos a tener muchas personas presas y eso lo tenemos que parar. So today, we will be voting to close Rikers Island,
Thank you,
to make
Councilmember.
major reform, and this is only a beginning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Rodriguez. Now we're going to hear from Councilmembers Van Bramer and then Espinal.
Thank you very much, Madam Majority Leader. First, I just want to say how much I respect this process today and my colleagues and the activists, whether we agree on how we're voting today or we disagree. I think, except for maybe a couple of things, debates like this highlight how good this body is and how decent the members here are, and how, regardless of how we're voting, people are voting their conscience and are sharing deeply held feelings and emotions. I don't cast aspersions on anyone's motivations and why they're voting and how they're voting today. I want to start by saying that I too believe Rikers is a human rights atrocity and it must close. And I want to acknowledge the work, as so many have before me, of Councilmember Drum, Speaker Melissa Mark-Viverito, all the activists who forced the city to realize that it must close. We've got to be able to have these challenging public policy debates that are emotional because they're so important, yet they're civil. Almost all of us want to close Rikers, but it's how this plan gets there that presents issues for me. I want to say also that Councilwoman Barron, I want to uplift her comments and associate myself with her remarks. So many people in the past have said Inez Barron is so smart, but boy is she radical, but boy is the world catching up to you, Councilmember Barron. I also want to say to Councilmembers Menchaca, Councilmembers Chin, Councilmembers Levin, we may be in different places on this, but boy, do I have so much respect for each of you. I believe that systemic and structural racism and violence inflicted on Black and brown communities for generations represents the greatest sin of this nation. And the criminalization and brutalization of people of color led to mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex that we seek to end here today. All of that coming to an end should be all of our life's work. But that's precisely why, for me, voting to invest $10 billion right back into that system is something I cannot do. Closing Rikers brings desperately needed justice, absolutely. But given the scale of violence perpetrated against communities of color, it's maximum justice that we must seek today. So we must close Rikers, and it will close. I support that. But I'm a no on the plan to build 4 new mega jails to accomplish that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Van Bramer. And we are now going to go to the report of special committees. But prior to doing that, I just want to remind members as we move into the vote, in the council handbook on the rules of the council, 9.160, the 2-minute rule, a member desiring to be excused from voting or to explain a vote at a stated meeting may, when his or her name is called, make a statement for no more than 2 minutes. So we are now going to move into the report of special committees.
None.
Reports of standing committees.
Report of the Committee on Consumer Affairs and Business Licensing, Intro 1657A, Street Vending.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Criminal Justice, Preconsidered Intros 1742A, 1759A, and 1762A, Rikers Island.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Finance, Preconsidered Reso 1093, Business Improvement Districts.
Coupled on general orders.
Preconsidered LU 555 and Reso 1100, and Preconsidered LU 556 and Reso 1101, Tax Exemptions.
Coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on General Welfare, Intro 153B, Three-Quarter Housing.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Land Use, Preconsidered Reso 1091, City Map Amendment.
Coupled on general orders.
LU 496 and Reso 1102 through LU 499 and Reso 1105, Landmark Designations.
Coupled on general orders.
LU 513 through LU 526 on page 9, Borough-Based Bail System.
Approved with modifications and referred to the City Planning Commission pursuant to Section 197D of the New York City Charter.
Excuse me, LU 527 and Reso 1106, UDAP Queens.
Coupled on general orders.
LU 528 and Reso 1107, Doctors Row Historic District.
Coupled on general orders.
LU 529 and Reso 1108, Sidewalk Cafe.
Approved with modifications and coupled on general orders.
LU 531 through LU 533, Vernon Boulevard, Broadway rezoning.
Approved with modifications and referred to the City Planning Commission pursuant to Section 197D of the New York City Charter.
LU 534 and Reso 1109, LU 535 and Reso 1110, 10, Left Rack City Parking Garage.
Coupled into general orders.
LU 538 and 539, 35th Avenue rezoning.
Approved with modifications and referred to the City Planning Commission pursuant to Section 197D of the New York City Charter.
LU 540 and Reso 1111 through LU 542 and Reso 1113, zoning map amendments.
Coupled into general orders.
LU 543 and 544, Terrence Cardinal Cook.
Approved with modifications and referred to the City Planning Commission pursuant to Section 197D of the New York City Charter.
LU 545 and Reso 1114 through preconsidered LU 557 and Reso 1117, various applications.
Coupled to general orders.
Report of the Committee on Mental Health, Disabilities, and Addiction, Intro 1590A, mental illness reporting.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
On the general order calendar now, LU 513 and Reso 1118 through LU 544 and Reso 1137 on page 21.
Coupled to general orders.
Resolution appointing various persons, Commissioner of Deeds.
Coupled to general orders, and at this time, I'm asking for a roll call vote on all of the items that were just read off that is on today's general order calendar.
Thank you.
Adams.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you, Madam. Today we vote on a plan to close Rikers Island. And as one who has had a child in the system, however brief, I would rather have had my child closer to home. As one who was raised by a proud mom who is a retired captain from the New York City Department of Correction, my directive from my mother was that Rikers should have been closed a long time ago. Today, colleagues, is the only opportunity that this sitting body will have to vote to close Rikers Island. We cannot wait for the possibility of a maybe, a possibility of another plan, a possibility of another proposal. Today is the only opportunity that this sitting body will have to vote to close Rikers Island. So on the strength of my strong, proud mother, on the strength of all the present and formerly incarcerated individuals that pushed us to not only invest in new buildings, but pushed us to invest in new opportunities, I stand on their strength today to say, I vote aye to close Rikers Island on the strength of my mother, on the strength of my child, on the strength of those that are flourishing, dying, and depressed on Rikers Island as we speak. Thank you, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Councilmember Adams.
Gibson.
I vote aye on all, and thank you once again, colleagues, for your tremendous passion and commitment to making the lives better of all New Yorkers. I vote aye on all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ampry Samuel.
I vote aye on all, with an exception. I vote no on the borough-based jail system bills, and I do congratulate my colleagues on your victories.
Ayala.
I vote aye on all.
Barron.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. I just want to call my colleagues' attention to Land Use 545. It is a land use item which has an infill project with new homes that have been built, and the income targeted requirement are those from 80 to 100% of the AMI. Once again, those are homes that are targeted for people whose incomes are between 80 to 100% of the AMI. And there are 9 two-family homes, and there are 4 three-family homes. And I want to encourage us to look for those kinds of opportunities for home ownership at a price that people can actually afford. And finally, I vote aye on all with the exception of 513 through 516 and 518 through 526. As my colleague has said, these borough-based jails do not address the conditions that led to people being detained. It does not address the inappropriate detention that disproportionately affects Black and brown. It does not address the subjectivity of judicial discretion, which favors whites. It does not address the unconstitutional practices of the NYPD, which again addresses the Black and brown communities and poor communities, and it does not address the insufficient, inadequate intervention vis-a-vis education, mental health, economic development, jobs, and affordable housing, and it does not address the culture that presently exists in Rikers. So for that reason, I'm voting no on those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Barron.
Borelli.
Thank you. I vote aye on all except preconsidered intro 1759, 1762, land use items 513 through 516, 518 through 526, and preconsidered reso 1091. Thank you.
Brannan.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
It's great to see so much press here to cover my Diker Heights Lights Christmas bill. Landmark legislation. I just want to congratulate. You hear a lot about you hear a lot of talk about political courage, and it is not easy to balance the needs and desires and doing the best for your district while also doing what's best for our city. So to Margaret and Stephen, Diana, and of course Karen, it's really, really something to look up to and admire the courage that you guys have had. And of course, Speaker Johnson in leading the way on this, something that when it first came up under Speaker Viverito was really, we never thought we'd see it happen, and here we are taking a first step to make it happen. So, and with thanks to Jason Goldman for helping me with my local bills today as well, I vote aye on all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cabrera.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you so much. I want to first thank the Speaker for whether we hold differences of opinion. The fact is we did have a fair process. Today I'm concerned about the $8.7 billion that we're going to incur in this as a result, a direct result of these bills. Let me tell you what that's going to translate into. Right now, we're paying $9 billion in service debt. $9 billion. This year, we're going to go into $10 billion. What that means, for the first time, as a matter of fact, for the very first time in the history of New York City, we're going to owe over $100 billion. Meaning that this year coming up, when we sit down and we start talking about all of the projects that we want to get done in our district, when we talk about all of the community services that we desperately need, and we applaud the Cure Violence community that has worked, but they need more resources. We need more community centers such as those we're going to see in the Bronx in Councilmember Ayala's district. We applaud what we're getting in those districts, but the fact of the matter is we're going to be lacking the resources. Sooner or later, we're going to hit this wall. We're going to hit a wall when we're going to start finding ourselves not being able to pay to help our young people, because at the end of the day, let me tell you, I'm tired of seeing our young people getting incarcerated. Tired of seeing them not having jobs. Now, every year we have to come here and fight with the administration to be able to get more summer jobs instead of having jobs on demand for every single one of our young people, so our young people could have a greater opportunity. And with that, I vote no on LU 513 through 516, 518 through 26, no and preconsider 1742, 1759, 1762A, and 1091, and aye on the rest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chin.
I proudly vote aye on all. Thank you.
Cohen.
Aye.
Constantinidis.
Aye on all.
Cornegie.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Rikers has been a symbol of torture, trauma, and extreme violence, and it's time to close it down. Too many generations have been failed by Rikers, a decrepit campus of facilities which is a symbol of New York City being home to one of the most devastatingly egregious penal systems in the United States. It's time for a new start. It's time for reform. The status quo is unacceptable. For years, before running for office or representing the 36th District, I worked on Rikers Island in the Department of Social Services and in the Department of Substance Abuse. I remember fighting for access to the housing units and trying to get out of my office and provide direct support to people who were incarcerated. As an elected representative of one of the most incarcerated communities in New York City, I recognize the urgency of ending mass incarceration and a massive overhaul of our pretrial detention system that the closure of Rikers Island requires. An overhaul that advocates were able to bring into fruition in this year's state legislative session. One of my proudest moments in the council was sponsoring and ultimately passing the Khalif Browder bill into law in 2017, which requires the city to provide access to education and social services to people awaiting trial. Shrinking the system and improving this ULURP in combination with the state-level criminal justice reforms allow us the opportunity to close Rikers and continue pushing forward with decarceration policies like increased mental health, alternatives to incarceration, and diversion programs. The transformative systematic change we seek to achieve in making these choices will not happen overnight, but delaying any further will only ensure the inevitable: continued existence of Rikers, the Tombs, the Brooklyn House, and the Barge. The status quo is unacceptable, and a better future is within our reach. That's why I'm voting yes to all.
Deutsch.
No on intro 1742, 1759, 1762, and Reso 1091, and no on LU 513 to 516 and 518 to 526. Aye in the rest.
Diaz.
Permission to explain my vote?
Yes, sir.
Gracias. Gracias a la prensa hispana que está aquí. Mi voto va a ser defendiendo a aquella gente que vive en los proyectos públicos que tienen que sufrir el abuso de no tener calefacción porque no hay dinero para arreglar las boilas. Mi voto es a favor de aquellos niños en las escuelas públicas que tienen que pasar todo un verano sin aire acondicionado. Mi voto es a favor de las familias que están desamparadas, que no tienen vivienda, que 60,000 familias que viven en shelter porque no tienen dinero para arreglarla, y yo no puedo votar para que se gaste 11 billones de dólares para construir 4 edificios de prisiones cuando todas esas familias, que son mi familia, están enfermas. My vote is for my family, for the people that live in NYCHA, for those that doesn't have a voice to defend them because they have to suffer every single year without money because there's no money to fix the boiler. My vote is for those children that have to suffer the summer in our public school because they have no air conditioning and they have no money to fix them. My vote is for those 60,000 families that live in shelter because there's no money for housing. I cannot vote to spend $10 or $11 billion to build 4 jail buildings while they are suffering. So I'm voting no in LU 513 to 526, no in resolution 1118 through 1130, and also no on resolution 1092. Thank you very much. I'll be the same. Bye. Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Drum.
I proudly vote aye to close the hellhole known as Rikers Island and on all other items on the calendar.
Thank you.
Espinal.
I proudly vote aye on all except the land use call-ups in regards to the borough-based jails.
Eugene.
I vote aye.
Joan, aye.
I vote an aye on all except for preconsidered resolution 1091.
Grodenchik.
Thank you. I'm not going to make additional remarks, except to say that, sorry, can't help myself. You know, this isn't about a choice between this or that. I don't think, based on my 4 years almost here, that you'll find somebody more concerned about the cost of doing business in the city of New York. It's not cheap, we know that. But we can do both, and we have to do both. And we have to help the people in NYCHA, and we have to fix our streets, and we have to fix a lot of things in this city, and we do that. We spend tremendous amounts of money. And we're not spending $8.75 billion tomorrow. It's going to take a long time to spend all that money. And hopefully it'll be a smaller number than that because the facilities have gotten smaller. So with that, I vote aye on all. I'm going to waive the balance of my time.
Quiet in the chamber.
I only have one vote, folks. I waive the balance of my time because my council has tickets to a team that plays something that resembles baseball in the Bronx tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Grodenchik. Again, we have asked that we respectfully hear all of the votes. Any further outbursts in this way will be taken as an assault on the security of this body, and you will be escorted out. So continue with the vote, and this is the final call and the final warning on this particular issue. Next.
Holden.
Aye on all except preconsidered Reso 1091, LUs 513 to 516, LUs 518 through 526, and all accompanying Resos.
Thank you.
Koo.
Majority Leader, may I explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Actually, you know, to save time, I'm not going to explain my vote. I vote yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Kozlowitz.
Can I explain my vote?
Permission granted.
I'm not going to talk long. I just forgot to mention Alex Anderson from my office, who worked very, very hard with me on this issue. So I want to say thank you. And I also want to thank Adrian Adams for having those long hearings that were really great and informative. So to Adrian, thank you. And I vote aye on all.
Thank you.
Lantzman.
Aye.
Lander.
Permission to explain?
Permission granted.
All right, I have some concerns with Councilmember Brannon's Christmas tree lighting bill, but I've decided I'm going to go with it anyway. When I joined the formerly incarcerated leaders and organizers from Just Leadership on the steps of this building 4 years ago in 2015, as they launched the campaign to close Rikers, I do not think I would have believed that 4 years later we would get to sit in the chambers and vote to do it. Organizing matters. I hope everybody who believes in it on all sides will keep doing it. I vote aye on all.
Levin.
Permission to explain my vote.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. I also want to acknowledge several people that I did not before. I'd like to acknowledge Miss V, Victoria Phillips, who was so excellent at our hearings and provided a live update on a message board that allowed us to see her thoughts in real time and opinions in real time, and we appreciate that. I'd also like to thank my staff who worked tirelessly on this for many months. Glamani Bravo Lopez, Deidre Cheatham, Jonathan Boucher, Nicole Hunt, Ben Solitaire, Betty Lester, and Elizabeth Adams, my legislative director, who did a tremendous amount of work on this. And I would also like to acknowledge Chair Adrian Adams for providing such an even-handed leadership as chair during this process in the hearing and beyond, and for reminding us why we're here doing this, and with a moral clarity that rings like a bell. I want to thank her. And with that, I vote aye on all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Levine.
Thank you. Permission to briefly explain my vote, Madam Majority Leader?
Permission granted. Please close out.
You could clear the balcony.
We are now going to exit the balcony.
You're going to clear the balcony?
Sergeant at Arms, please clear out the balcony.
Is it me? It's me, right? Yeah, okay. Wow. Levine, Levine's like, it's like a trigger word, the name Levine. It's like a trigger word.
We are sorry for the inconvenience, but we cannot tolerate things being thrown from the balcony. It compromises the security and the safety of every individual here, and we have to all see that. Throwing things over the balcony compromises the safety of every member in this body. We understand that others were not participating, but we cannot tolerate things being thrown over the balcony. It's inexcusable, it's dangerous, it's unfair, it is inappropriate. I apologize to those of you who are here to witness this particular vote, but we cannot compromise the safety of this body. Thank you. Thank you for your participation. When items are thrown over the balcony, you've created an unsafe environment. Thank you for your participation. We appreciate you being here. We apologize that you have to leave because of the actions of others.
No new jail.
Thank you. Thank you. We are now going to continue with the vote. We left off with Council Member Steve Levin. We left off with Council Member Mark Levine. Thank you.
It's a common mistake.
Quiet in the chamber.
I'm disappointed that no one wanted to hear me explain my vote. I simply wanted to express my profound gratitude and admiration for Councilmember Diana Ayala, Councilmember Karen Kozlowitz, Councilmember Margaret Chen, Councilmember Steve Levin, for Speaker Corey Johnson, for former Council Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito. Thank you for your leadership, for being thoughtful and compassionate and principled. Because of you, we are undertaking what is without a doubt the most important and certainly the largest decarceration project in America today, which will not only transform criminal justice in the 5 boroughs of New York City, it will set an example that will reverberate nationally and beyond. Thank you to everyone in this body, past and present. Thank you to all the advocates and leaders throughout the city who made this possible. I proudly vote aye on all.
Thank you.
Lewis.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. First, I would like to thank Speaker Johnson for your leadership throughout this process and for taking the time to speak with me. I have a lot of respect for Council Members Kozlowitz, Chen, Levin, and Ayala. Through this process, you were very strong, so I respect you all for your decision and for the process that you allowed to take place. I also want to thank my colleagues, Council Members Ampry Samuels, Barron, Espinal, and Yeager for taking the time to meet with me, speak with me, and help me understand the process. I hope some of you remember that I'm a new member and a woman of color who represents a district that has been disproportionately affected by mass incarceration of Black and brown people. I can say certainly that closing Rikers is crucially something that we need to do, but building borough-based jails will not remedy our already broken criminal justice system. We continuously speak about the effects of a criminal justice system designed to punish people who look like me, who are my neighbors, family, friends, constituents, but this process, I believe, will not solve or change the problem, but it will move the problem. I am not comfortable with rebuilding new jails while we have yet to address the issues on the ground in communities that let the cycle continue to perpetuate. In addition, I am not comfortable with the fact that my colleagues in Central Brooklyn were left out of the conversation that will dictate the futures of our constituents. Rikers is definitely a dark stain on the city and it needs to be closed, but the process needs more oversight. While member deference is very important, we weren't considered in the process, but I believe this is an opportunity to add Black and brown council members in the conversations and the ongoing process to ensure that we end the pipeline destroying our communities. My hope is that with the millions of dollars that's being put into community investments, that the administration will earmark funds for communities like East Flatbush by providing more schools, a rural recreation center, and a substantive restorative justice plan created to protect officers like my brother who was stabbed over 4 times at Rikers. A real treatment plan and a strategy to deal with inmates that have mental health issues, and a real workforce place center in neighborhoods like Flatbush. This was a very hard vote for me. My district is split because of this vote, and I need you all to understand that this was very hard for me, but I vote aye on this particular topic and hope to continue to work with you all through this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Menchaca.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
I know we've been focused on a few of the land use items. I want to point you to the Sunset Park South Historic Districts. There are 4 districts in front of you. You may not notice this, but it's incredibly uncommon, rare. In fact, first time ever that the agency, the the Landmarks Preservation Commission, is allowing for 4 districts to move forward at the same time. And that's a tribute to the incredible work that Sunset Park is doing. I want to point you to Sunset Park and the work that we're doing every day. We are a community that's going through massive gentrification pressures, and our communities are incredibly diverse. Yet we come together and we talk in dialogue with respect about the things that are important to us in our neighborhood. And these 4 applications resemble that kind of power. And so with that, I want to lift up the courage of Sunset Park to continue to push me to join in their work, and also lift up the courage that we're having here today with the honest discussions around closing Rikers and the borough-based jail system. The courage that is going to be required after this vote is to remain unified, and I hope that we can do that as a body. I will be voting no on the borough-based jail systems, so you can jot me down no on that part. But I also want to say a few words to Judge Littman and former Speaker Melissa Mark-Viverito, because I remember those early conversations and we were talking about closing Rikers, and that's what I want to do. And I know that's what we're going to do. But today, and this is my conversations that I was having last night with Councilmember Reynoso and Torres. We spent a lot of time on the phone last night, and how beautiful it is that we're talking not about closing Rikers, we're talking about how. And that is a revolutionary step, and I can't wait to take more revolutionary steps with you. I vote aye on the rest.
Thank you.
Miller.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. So it's been a lot of a conversation about describing the inhumanities, whether it's Rikers Island, inmates, and as well as the Department of Corrections staff, and particularly correction officers that are often forced to spend double and triple tours on Rikers Island. Over the past 2 years, it's been a lot of conversation and consultation about those inhumanities that got us all to the point that understand that Rikers Island is a blight that has to be eliminated and closed. But understand that closing Rikers Island for many of us, for those of us who live and suffer those scourges that represent communities that have been disproportionately impacted, that have that the closing of Rikers Island is simply the lowest bar when it comes to criminal justice reform. It is the low-hanging fruit that does not address many of the issues that have perpetuated the incarceration that we have seen. But as my colleagues have said and demonstrated today, that there's been a lot of consultation, there's been a lot of leadership around this issue, and it's got us to the point that we have spoken, that we've talked about services, we've talked about policy, we've talked about programming that addresses those issues. Has it gotten us completely there? We are certainly on our way. But I would like to add my commitment to continue to work with Karen, Margaret, Steve, and Diana, as well as the speaker, to continue to fulfill our collective goals of not just closing Rikers Island, but eliminating the mass incarceration that we have seen. And part of that conversation has to be a real conversation about a system that has historically perpetuated disproportionate incarceration of black and brown folks, a court system, its jurists, and all the things that are happening. I'm looking forward to.
Thank you, Councilmember.
I'm looking forward to the implementation of the laws that have been passed in Albany over the past session, putting those to work, but more importantly, working with my colleagues here to make sure that we make real change when it comes to criminal justice reform. With that, I'll be voting aye.
Thank you.
Moya.
I vote aye.
Perkins.
Thank you. In tribute to the Central Park Five, I vote aye on all.
Thank you for your vote.
Powers.
I vote aye on all.
Reynoso.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. Every single person in jail represents a failure by our society, a failure to provide opportunity, a failure to provide health care, a failure to support those who need it most. And there is no greater representation of that failure than Rikers Island. Rikers is a torture chamber where detainees are subject to inhumane treatment, permanently traumatizing some of our most vulnerable citizens. Our current justice system is more reflective of an ancient eye-to-eye philosophy, predicated on revenge rather than rehabilitation. The system reflects our most base desires for retribution rather than a higher ideal of pursuing positive outcomes for tragic events. Our history is the history of this system can be directly traced to our country's original sin, slavery, and is a direct manifestation of white supremacy and the subjugation of black and brown people. We must do better, and closing Rikers once and for all is something that we must do today. I do want to say in Spanish for my Spanish language media as well. En este momento sabemos que en la cárcel hay una injusticia. No dice que nosotros no podemos buscar inversiones para las familias que están en Aicha, que están en la escuela, y también buscar justicia para nuestra gente que están en la cárcel. Yo me paro aquí hoy apoyando el trabajo que han hecho estos concejales para asegurar que el futuro debajo de Rikers no exista y un futuro debajo de cárcel más humana sí existe. Por eso que estoy votando hoy yo en favor de cerrando Rikers Island. And I just want to give a big thank you to Melissa Margarito for the work that she did in her time as Speaker in making sure that she championed an issue that everyone thought we were absolutely out of our minds for pushing. And now we're here actually doing it because of her leadership and her strength. So I want to thank you for that. And thank you to everyone who voted in favor and not. And we will be working to do better. And thank you, Speaker Corey Johnson.
And how do you vote?
Aye on all.
Thank you.
Richards.
Quickly, permission to explain my vote. Last summer or the summer before, I had the opportunity to visit Rikers and to really speak to many of those young men and women who were being detained there. And one of the things I heard overwhelmingly, I thought we were going to hear complaints overwhelmingly about food, but the complaint was for the need for a better law library, the need for more vocational training, the need for more job opportunities when they got out. And I just want to lift them up because I really left the island a lot more inspired by those young people who the world has literally turned their backs on. So with that, I want to vote aye for those young people I met there.
Thank you.
Rivera.
Just want to thank my colleagues for leading this thoughtful discussion on criminal justice reforms and for realizing and committing to continuing a focused conversation beyond today's vote. Our work is far, far from over. I vote aye on all.
Thank you.
Rodriguez.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you again, Speaker, Mayor de Blasio, Jason, Emma, to Chief of Staff of the Council, and the Mayor and the four colleagues, Steve, Margaret, Ayala, and Karen, and the advocate. As I said before, this plan is only a beginning. This is not the end. I believe that we should end, as we have Vision Zero with a big goal, we should aim to beat the city of New York without one person being in a detention center. That will happen, and we create good paid job, and we invest in the same quality education to every single child in New York City. That will happen when we respect each other. That's what happens when we end the racism and discrimination. But until we get there, we need to be to put together the best plan to give dignity of anyone that we send to the detention center. I call for the city of New York also to start exploring to establish a reparation to the population of New Yorkers who have spent time in Rikers Island in an institution full of corruption, violence, human rights abuse, where the lives of minors were destroyed. Con esto estamos votando, asegurándonos de que nosotros estamos comenzando. El objetivo debe ser nosotros construir una ciudad donde nosotros acabemos por siempre con las condiciones de pobreza que vivimos. I can tell you that for me it was not an easy one at the end to yes vote for the plan as a whole, because I don't believe in a society where we should have jail. However, I do trust the speaker, I do trust Jason, Eamon de Blasio, and my colleague when it comes to putting together a plan or reinvesting in our community. Every year, we've been investing more, $150 million to the private sector to create jobs. But those jobs are only in the Midtown area. Those jobs are in Brooklyn, the Long Island City. If we want to attack poverty and violence, we need to invest the same amount of money for any private sector that create good paid jobs and to invest to provide the same quality education to everyone. With that, I vote aye.
Thank you.
Rose.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
I want to congratulate Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito. When she first discussed this, many people said that it wasn't possible. So I want to congratulate her for her insight and foresight. I want to thank my colleagues and Speaker Johnson for their grace and courage, many times under fire, for shepherding this groundbreaking and historic legislation that will truly change the trajectory of the criminal justice system for all Black and brown people. And with that, I vote aye on all.
Thank you.
Rosenthal.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly join with my colleagues in fulfilling our moral duty to approve this historic plan to shut down the deadly, abusive, decrepit Rikers jails forever. This is one of the most important votes I will make as a member of this body, and I truly thank the leadership of our colleagues, Melissa Mark Viverito, Corey Johnson, Karen Koslowitz, Margaret Chin, Diana Ayala, and Steve Levin. Your fierce negotiations set us on the trail to closing Rikers successfully. But we're not just closing Rikers, we're reducing the number of city jails from 12 to 4. We're creating humane facilities that will bring detainees closer to their families and critical resources. As chair of the Committee on Women and Gender Equity, there is one commitment I am especially proud of. The administration's pledge that if an appropriate and more centrally located site becomes available, they will work with advocates and the council to assess its feasibility for use as a woman's jail in lieu of the current plan to house women in a space adjoining the men's Queens facility. I will work closely with Close Rosie's, the Women's Community Justice Association, and other advocates to seize this historic opportunity and lay the groundwork for a standalone community justice facility for women, trans, and gender nonconforming New Yorkers. Today, the vast majority, 85% of females held on Rikers are mothers. As the number of incarcerated women continues to drop, we need a facility with sufficient space for much-needed programming, mental health therapy, substance abuse counseling, medical personnel, and most importantly, space for children and other family members. If I may just wrap up.
Thank you.
We need a facility that fully integrates a trauma-informed guiding philosophy to help women build support networks and break the cycle of incarceration and recidivism. A facility that supports recovery, rehabilitation, and family reunification. A facility that enables incarcerated women to move forward with their lives. Today, we are taking a profoundly important step toward that vision. I proudly vote aye on all.
Thank you.
Salamanca.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Thank you. While there should be no debate on the closure of Rikers, the course that the administration has taken to get there has lacked the critical feedback of community stakeholders in the Bronx. Whereas the city followed the recommendations of the Littman Commission to build borough-based jails at locations of existing detention centers near county courthouses in 3 of the 4 boroughs, the administration cited a location that is more than 2.5 miles away from the Bronx courthouse. The response from the community and elected officials alike was immediate in their opposition to the location. Nevertheless, the administration moved forward with their plans, leaving many in the South Bronx wondering if a commitment to the meaningful community engagement was a convenient bullet point on a presentation. Additionally, the community's dissatisfaction with the new borough-based plan extends to the broken promises of previous administrations to keep the Vernon C. Bain Correctional Center, otherwise known as the Barge, operating. Asking our community to accept a brand new jail without closing the Barge first is wholly unacceptable and disingenuous to Bronxites. I have given the administration numerous opportunities on public hearings to address this concern relating to the Barge, but have been vastly disappointed each time at not even hearing most preliminary estimate timelines to sinking the boat. Even without citing the other issues that have originated from the council hearings over the last 2 months, I cannot vote in favor of certain actions on this land use application in its current form. The administration cannot simply ignore the valid concerns of the community and expect us to accept this decision. I implore the mayor to continue exploring all siting options near the Bronx County Courthouse where this jail belongs, once and for all, and for once and for all, sink the Barge. And for that reason, I will be voting no on LUs 518 and 519, and aye on all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Torres. Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
In the 1990s, there were well over 20,000 people on Rikers Island. By 2026, the number will fall to 3,300. The closing of Rikers Island, combined with a more than 600% plunge in the New York City jail population, represents one of the most extraordinary strides toward decarceration ever to be undertaken by any city in the United States. What would have been unthinkable only a few years ago is about to become the law of New York City. The plan before us has 4 core elements. First, it would close Rikers Island. Second, it would reduce the jail population to historic lows, and in doing so, end the era of mass incarceration. Third, it would reduce the overall number of jails in New York City. The city will ultimately have fewer jails, not more. And fourth, it would replace old jails whose conditions of confinement have become unlawfully unsafe and inhumane, a fact the opposition overlooks. My council district was home to Khalif Browder. Accused but never convicted of a crime, Khalif languished for 3 years in Rikers Island, where he was psychologically tortured by solitary confinement and physically brutalized by violence at the hands of fellow inmates and correction officers. The trauma of his confinement was so profound that he ultimately took his own life. Even when Khalif left Rikers Island never left him.
That's right.
Communities of color continue to bear the scars of mass incarceration. One cannot separate the ends from the means. One cannot separate closing Rikers Island from the very plan that would enable the closing of Rikers Island. The underlying question on which the City Council is voting is whether to close Rikers Island. And whatever the nuances of your own beliefs about criminal justice reform, the vote before us presents a simple, stark choice. We can either vote to keep Rikers open indefinitely in pursuit of a perfect plan, or we can vote to close Rikers once and for all. I choose to close Rikers Island. Mr. Speaker, I vote aye.
Thank you.
Traeger.
Permission to expand my vote?
Permission granted.
Yeah, because I waited a long time. Number one, there is a funded plan for air conditioning in all New York City schools because of this New York City Council.
Thank you.
And for anyone to reference NYCHA or schools, I question how many doors you've knocked on to help elect a Senate Democratic majority up in Albany. I know the Speaker has, The former speaker has as well. Many of the ills we face in this city is based on the disinvestment from Albany and Washington. So let's, number one, get that straight. Now let me get to my comments. I, like many of my colleagues, feel keenly the historical weight of the actions which are before us today. Under the leadership of Speaker Viverito, following the persistent advocacy of groups like Just Leadership and the Close Rikers and Beyond Rosie's coalition, many of us committed to the moral urgency of closing Rikers Island, which is plagued by violence, brutality, isolates incarcerated people from their families and communities, and keeps the conditions and impacts of incarceration outside of the public consciousness and our collective conscience. I will be voting yes today because, simply put, I feel that this vote is necessary to close Rikers. Many families in my district have suffered from the impacts of mass incarceration and a justice system which too often criminalizes poverty. Parts of my district, particularly Coney Island, have been irrevocably harmed time and time again by policies crafted with abject disregard for communities of color, redlining, autocratic urban renewal plans, disinvestment in affordable and public housing, and inequitable resourcing of public schools, among many others. I fully understand why people directly impacted by incarceration would question the ability of government to make meaningful progress when the history of our communities was littered with broken promises. Make no mistake, this plan, even with nearly $500 million in added investments through the points of agreement, is not sufficient to fully achieve justice for communities impacted by mass incarceration. If I could have one more minute. However, for me, to vote no would give credence to the prevailing sentiment from just a few years ago that closing Rikers was overly idealistic and impossible. There will be not another opportunity to vote to close Rikers in the near future. I do not have confidence that there is the political and bureaucratic will to close Rikers outside of this vote. This is the day of decision. We have the opportunity to reaffirm the commitment to the moral obligation to close Rikers and continue the historic arc of the criminal justice reform work on the city and state level.
Thank you.
And I'll just close, I have more, but I'll just close by saying it is no coincidence that one of the most compassionate and consequential justice reform bills in this council to close Rikers was led by 3 powerful and extraordinary women, plus Steve Levin. Karen, Diana, Margaret, Steve, you're all extraordinary. I vote aye.
Thank you.
Vallone.
Permission to explain my vote?
Permission granted.
Well, no one will ever say we're not a passionate body of city council members. And thank you for letting us have our time today, Madam Majority Leader. I rise as someone who actually served on the Board of Corrections for years and spent much time on Rikers Island with our board members, with these council members, watching Danny Drum go through the halls with Corey and fighting for change and seeing the sadness that permeated Rikers Island. Sadness from everyone, sadness the corrections officers, from the detainees, the family members, those who suffered and languished on that island. No one here is advocating at all to keep Rikers Island open. The status quo must end. It is on our backs to decide how to reform that system. And there's 2 very keen proposals that we were looking at: reinvesting and destroying and rebuilding Rikers Island, or community facilities. And while we struggled with that, I just wanted to add to our members today, while we talk about the reforms that are needed, there are many voices that come to us in many different forms. And there's also the voices of the mother that buries a child, and a family member that suffered a murder, and those who have had violent felonies committed against them. And they come to us and say, am I safe? Those who commit those crimes must be incarcerated in a correctional facility that can handle them and protect others that shouldn't be there. That is also on our table today. And I say, please don't forget those voices while we build that facility for the future. So the argument for me is always been to keep Rikers Island. But with today's vote to rezone and the resolution to change that, we no longer have that option. And I commend Karen Kozowitz and the delegation chair for her leadership to find a viable option close to the court system. And it's hard to argue against a facility close to that system. So that's my dilemma today and my argument, and I thank you all for trying to get me to that place. I vote aye on everything except for preconsidered resolution 1091 and vote yes on all other items. Thank you, Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you.
Van Bramer.
I vote no on Land Use 513 through 526 and accompanying resolutions 1118 through 1130, and aye on all others.
Yeager.
Thank you. I vote aye on all, with the exception of Intro 1762, Resolution 1091, and Land Use 513 through 516, 518 through 526, and the accompanying resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matteo.
I vote no on Land Use 513, 516, 518, and 526 with all the accompanying resolutions. Preconsidered resolution 1091. I also vote no, and no on 759 and 762. Aye on the rest.
Cumbo.
I vote aye.
Speaker Johnson.
Today has been a historic and important day here at the New York City Council, and I am grateful for all of the members who spoke up. It was an intense day of people figuring out the best way forward with their own conscience. And I am proud of this body. I am proud of Speaker Mark Viverito getting us to this point and turning the reins over to all of us who got to continue here after 2017. I think today is a day when Rikers Island is demolished. Today is a day that the history books will look back on as a good day for the future of New York City, as getting rid of a profound and painful symbol of inhumanity and brutality that was allowed to fester and be in the East River for far too long. So today is not the end of the journey. Today is a good step in something concrete to move this city forward. We still must push for additional funds on combating homelessness and interrupting violence and getting people the services that they need in communities all across the city. But again, let's make no mistake about this. This is a step forward. This is progress. This is the right thing to do. And so I am grateful. I want to just end by again singling out a few people who I mentioned before. The staff here at the City Council has been working around the clock, and I am exceedingly grateful to Jason Goldman, Lillian Pascone, Jennifer Firmino, Raju Mann, Brian Crow, Alana Sivin, Isha Wright, LaTanya McKinney, Regina Pareto-Ryan, and George Sarkisian. And I want to make sure that I don't forget anyone, because these folks have been working. I want to thank Peter Butler as well. All of them have worked so hard in getting us here today. And I think this is a day that we will look back on as a great day for the future of New York City. And the City Council did something very, very good today. So I proudly vote aye on this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Corey Johnson, for your leadership. We'll now have introduction and reading of bills.
All bills are referred to as committees indicated on today's agenda.
Just need 30 seconds. All items on today's general order calendar are adopted by a vote. Quiet in the chamber. A 49 in the affirmative, 0 negative, and 0 abstentions, with the exception of Intro 1759A, which was adopted by a vote of 45 in the affirmative, 4 negative, and 0 abstentions. Intro 1762A, which was adopted by a vote of 44 affirmative, 5 negative, and 0 abstentions. Reso 1091, which was adopted by a vote of 40 in the affirmative, 9 negative, and 0 abstentions. Intro 1742A, which was adopted by a vote of 46 in the affirmative, 3 negative, 0 abstentions. and LUs 513 through 516 with accompanying resos, which was adopted by a vote of 36 in the affirmative, 13 negative, and 0 abstentions. LUs 518 and 519 with accompanying resos, which was adopted by a vote of 35 affirmative, 14 negative, and 0 abstentions. LUs 520 through 526 with accompanying resos, which was adopted by a vote of 36 in the affirmative, 13 negative, and 0 abstentions. The revised land use call-up vote is 48 in the affirmative and 1 negative.
Councilmember Levin waives his time to speak. He thanked enough people, and I'm thanking everyone on his behalf.
No general.
Yeah. Madam Majority Leader,
Yes.
are we ready to adjourn?
Give me one moment.
Okay.
We will now have introduction and reading of bills.
All bills have been referred to committee as indicated on today's agenda.
Thank you. There are no resolutions on today's agenda, so we will now move into general discussion. Seeing that there are no members that are listed on the general discussion, we will now have Speaker Corey Johnson to close today's meeting.
Madam Majority Leader, you did an outstanding job today, and I'm really
Thank you.
grateful for you chairing this meeting.
Thank you.
You did a wonderful job. I'm proud
Thank
of your
you.
leadership. The stated meeting of October 17th, 2019 is hereby adjourned.